get the text. 532. Got the 532 has come, and we have to read from a little analysis. Fine. Yeah. Towards the bottom of the page, a little analysis. Oh, my computer is playing games with me. Just 1 minute. 5. So we have to read. A little analysis will make this apparent. We've been talking about memory and the ego. All right. So we had a discussion yesterday about the ego and the memory. So memory can fail, but to get rid of the ego is very difficult. And memory also, we can't get rid of the memory. It disappears by itself with age. Okay. But some of the, it's very interesting phenomenon. Some of the old memories don't get wiped out. Only the recent memories get wiped out. Okay. So that is the thing. So let's read. Archana ji, are you in a position to read?
I can read.
Yes, Yasmin, continue, please.
Okay. Then a little analysis. We'll read the paragraph.
Analysis will make this apparent. We have in all functionings of the mentality 4 elements: the object of mental consciousness, the act of mental consciousness, the occasion, and the subject. In the self-experience of the self-observing inner being, the object is always some state of movement or wave of the conscious being. Anger, grief, or other emotion, hunger, or other vital craving, impulse, or inner life reaction, or some form of sensation, perception, or thought activity. The act is some kind of mental observation and conceptual valuation of this movement or wave, or else a mental sensation of it in which observation and valuation may be involved and even lost. So that in this act, the mental person may either separate the act and the object by distinguishing perception, or confuse them together indistinguishably. That is to say, he may either simply become a movement, let us put it, of angry consciousness, not at all standing back from that activity, not reflecting or observing himself, not controlling the feeling or the accompanying action, or he may observe what he becomes and reflect on it. With this seeing or perception in his mind, I am angry. In the former case, the subject or mental person, the act of conscious self-experience, and the substantial angry becoming of the mind, which is the object of self-experience, are all rolled up into one wave of conscious force in movement. But in the latter, there is a certain rapid analysis of its constituents, and the act of self-experience partly detaches itself from the object. Thus, by this act of partial detachment, we are able not only to experience ourselves dynamically in the becoming, in the process of movement of conscious force itself, but to stand back, perceive and observe ourselves, and if the detachment is sufficient, to control our feeling and action, control to some extent our becoming.
Okay. Very complicated psychological analysis of what he's saying. Let's try to understand what he's saying. It's not very easy, but we'll try. Okay. So he is discussing memory and ego, and he is now saying that when we are experiencing something, it's not just one experience. There are many, many elements in it. There is the thing which is causing your reaction, then there is your own reaction, and there is your consciousness which is separate from all these things. Okay. So, and he's saying there are 4 elements in this. I'll read each one and let us see whether we can make out what he's saying. Not very easy, but we'll try. A little analysis will, so we'll be saying a little analysis. For us, it will be a huge analysis. Okay, a little analysis will make this apparent. We have, make what apparent? Let's go back to the previous paragraph and I will just remind you what he said in the previous paragraph. So otherwise, he'll be hanging. So he's saying, we'll make this apparent. So what is this? So let's look at what he's saying. Okay, just 1 second. Yeah. Oh. I'm trying to. I've got it. So I'm reading out the summary of what you said earlier. Okay? So he's saying, in the active mutability of the surface being, this is very clear. Our surface being is body, vital and mind, and they are always in motion. They are never very steady. Neither the body, even when you are sitting quietly in a chair, there is a movement in the body. We have discussed that yesterday. Now, you are breathing in and breathing out, and even that is a movement. Okay, so everything in the active mutability of the surface being, the function of memory becomes very important. In the self, memory becomes wide and vast, covering all past, present, and the future, and assures us of our eternal existence. So what he's saying is, so long as we are identified with our body, mind, life, memory is okay. It is there to a certain extent of the past. Memory of future is not possible yet when you are identified with your body, mind, life, but something of the past is there. But how far deep does it go into the past? Not very much. But certainly we don't remember what we were when we are 2 years old or 3 years old. And sometimes we forget, even in old age, we forget even what has happened 10 minutes ago. That happens. But he's saying that when you rise into the self, go outside your body, mind, life, your memory becomes vast. You remember even your past life. You even have a glimpse of what can happen in the future. Memory goes even into the future. That is how you can see the future. That's how Sri Aurobindo could forecast even the coming events in the future. India will be free, okay? All this sort of thing. So now, but in the time sequence of the world, I'm reading the summary. It links the 3 or 2 times. Where is the 3? Past, present, and future. But if you think that the present doesn't exist because it's a junction of the past and the present, so it becomes 2 times and ensures continuance of personality and prevents chaos and dissociation of personality. When we don't have memory at all, then what is happening 2 minutes ago or 2 seconds ago has no relevance to what we are doing now. So there's chaotic behavior. That happens with dementia and dissociation of personality. But still, we must not exaggerate its unique importance. There is also the ego, which contributes to this aspect of continuance. Okay, memory is mortal. In mortal man is only a link between the sense mind and the coordinating intelligence, manas, buddhi. Okay, memory supplies past data to mind, but cannot carry it into the present from moment to moment on the in the physical world. So this is what he has said in the. So memory has got a limited function when you are identified with your body, mind, life. But when you are not identified with your body, mind, life, memory becomes a vast remembrance of what you were in the past and what you will even be in the future. Okay, and you realize that you are pure soul and not body, mind, life. So this is what he's talking about. So he's saying, now we come back to the paragraph that we have to read today. A little analysis will make this apparent. We have in all functionings of the mentality 4 elements. When we are thinking, simply saying there are 4 elements. The object of mental consciousness. What are we thinking about? Are we thinking about the divine? Are we thinking about the life divine that we are reading now? Or are we thinking about dinner? Okay. So that's the object of our mental consciousness, number 1. Then the act of mental consciousness, the process of thought, the very fact that your mind is going towards the object of your consciousness and thinking about it, that's the second element, the act of mental consciousness. Then the occasion and the subject. The occasion is the occasion is the time factor, because you can have the same experience yesterday and today, so that the occasion also is there, even all the other things remaining same. And the subject. Okay. So he's saying the subject. Now, what is the subject? We'll have a look. So he's saying the 4 elements in other simpler words I have put like this. Let us see if we can understand. The observed. Okay. That which is observed is the first element. It can be, as I said, it can be a book, it can be a person going in the road, or it can be your own anger and your greed. Okay. Then there is the observer, which is a mental being. Okay. The observer is observing. There is the difference between the thinker and the thought. So that's what he's saying. The act of observing. This is very clear. There is a thinker in us and it is thinking. But this thinker can stop thinking. Therefore, there is a difference between the thinker and the thought. Okay. And that's what happens when your consciousness goes to the self. And there is the occasion. The occasion is the time, all the other things being the same, but it could have happened yesterday, it could have happened today, it may happen in the future. So these are the 4 elements he's talking about. The observed, okay, that which is being observed. As I said, it could be subjective or it could be objective. If it is objective, a car is going in the road, objective. But your own anger, your greed, your happiness, that's your subjective. So that is also being observed. Okay. So that which is observed, number 1, the observer. Who is observing? Your mental being. Okay. And the mental being is engaged in the act of observing. That is a thought. So there can be a difference between the thought and the thinker and the thought. That's usually we identify the same. We think that they are, but if you think a little bit, yes, there can be the thought and the thinker, they are separate. You can actually observe yourself also thinking. In fact, if you can do that, the moment there is a thought, it's interesting. I'll just say again something. I can observe my thought. Huh? Let's go one by one. I can observe my body. Oh, yesterday I had a fall and I am having pain in my hand. Okay. You are observing your body. You can do that. It's possible to observe your body. Can you observe your emotions? You can. Yesterday I was angry. Day before yesterday I was very happy. So you can observe your vitals. But after it has happened, then can you observe your thought? Of course you can observe your thought. But also after it has happened. Yeah? So yesterday I was thinking about the problem in life divine. Yesterday I was thinking what I should do. Should I take a holiday or should I not? So you can observe your thought, but only after it has happened. Now, if you can observe your thought while it is occurring simultaneously, then there is a difference between the thinker and the thought. And that makes you go outside your body-mind life. The thinker becomes the consciousness and it separates itself from the body-mind life. So that's the difference. And then finally there is the occasion. So these are the 4 elements that he's talking about. Okay. So the object of mental consciousness, the act of mental consciousness, the occasion, and the subject. The subject is the one who is the thinker. In the self-experience of the self-observing inner being. Okay. So what is this? In the self-experience of the self-observing inner being, I am observing myself. Okay. And it's an experience. Self-experience, subjective emotions or thoughts. Okay. It can be thought or it can be emotions within yourself, self-experience, not experience of the physical world. So when Srimad is talking of self-experience, he is talking of the psychological movements within yourself, because you can experience the world. Then it is not self-experience. You are experiencing something outside yourself. So in the self-experience of the who is having self-experience? The self-observing inner being. Okay? There's a consciousness in you which is observing your own anger, your own subjective movements. The object is always some state or movement or wave of the conscious being. So he's taking 3 examples: anger, grief, or other emotion, hunger, or other vital craving. So it can be all these things. The subjective element. Self-experience is talking about impulse or inner life reaction or some form of sensation, perception, or thought activity. Sensation, the body, because sensation is of the nerves. If you don't have nerves, you won't have sensation. So it's of the body. Perception, okay, of the vital, and thought activity. It can be of the body, life, or mind. All these activities you are observing. The act is some kind of mental observation and conceptual valuation. Now he is introducing another act. The act is some kind of mental observation and conceptual valuation of this movement or wave, or else a mental sensation of it, in which observation and valuation may be involved and even lost. So it's very interesting what he's saying. When you are observing something, okay, let's say movement, let's say anger. Okay, we'll go more step by step. When I'm seeing I'm only observing the anger in me, but you're not valuing, you're not making a value to it. But it's possible also that when it is occurring, when you are angry, you can either identify yourself fully with the anger and lose the subject. Subject is gone. You become the anger. You have identified with your anger. Normally, 100% at our level, that's what happens. Okay. But it is also possible that there is a slight difference and you value your anger. It is not good. I should not have got angry. Or you may even say to yourself, oh, my anger was justified. Then you are giving a value to what you are observing. It's possible to observe without valuation, but sometimes observation and valuation can become one. Okay? He is going into very subtle psychology. The act of some kind of mental observation and conceptual valuation of this movement or wave. Okay? Movement or wave. He's saying that these emotions that come in are actually waves coming in from outside, and they have a response in your being. Don't think that the anger is being generated within yourself. Sometimes it can be generated within yourself, but most of the time it is coming from the universal, the world atmosphere around you. They are sending all these, like thoughts enter your brain, sentiments also and emotions also come from outside, and you have a response to it. Okay, that's exactly what he's saying. Or else a mental sensation of it, in which observation and valuation may be involved and even lost. In other words, both are identified or you are not doing that at all. So that, he is explaining, so that in this act, the mental person may either separate the act and the object by a distinguishing perception or confuse them together indistinguishably. So the thinker becomes the thought, or the observer becomes the observed. This is there. Or the observer may be quite different from the observed, and he may be even evaluating it. As I said, I have become angry. I am anger. That's number one. 90% is our normal condition that happens. We identify ourselves with the anger. But if you are a very mental person and you're very intelligently objective, you can associate, you can evaluate your own emotions. That's what Srimad is saying. In other words, I should not have got angry. That can happen afterwards. But there is also a possibility of immediate, spontaneous, simultaneous evaluation. I am getting angry, but I should not get angry. Or I am getting angry, but it is justified. Okay. This is, you are evaluating at the same time. Okay. So these are the two possibilities. That is to say, I'm reading the text. That is to say, he may either simply become a movement. Okay. Let us put it, of angry consciousness. Your consciousness becomes anger. Your consciousness is always separate, but it puts on the color of anger. Your consciousness can put on any color of any emotion, and the color will differ. Suppose it is a happy condition, it could be a very pleasant bluish or a pinkish, or if it is anger, it can be a reddish, okay, and even a dirty color. Okay, so this is actually what happens. Not at all standing back from the activity, not reflect. This is when you are identified with your anger. Not reflecting or observing himself, not controlling the feeling or the accompanying action. Or he may observe what he becomes and reflect on it. If you are reflecting, you are evaluating. So you may observe. So the observer and the observed are different. Okay, what he becomes and reflect on it. With this seeing or perception in his mind, I am angry. So you are not the anger, but anger, you are, the anger is, you are observing your anger. Same is only using one angry, but it can so many other emotions. In the former case, the subject or mental person, now we can understand what Srimad is saying by mental person. The Manomaya Purusha. Okay? That's the subject. He has used the word subject before, and that's why I have made it a little different. Mental person. The act of conscious self-experience and the substantial angry becoming of the mind. Now, that is why I was saying your anger is not something hazy and abstract. It is substantial. You must remember this. Srimad is using the word substantial. This is very, very clear. Your body is not the only substance. Okay? Your vitality, your emotions are also substance, but more subtle substance. But it is a substance. Your mind also, the thoughts are substance, very subtle substance, but it is substance. It is matter, very subtle matter. It becomes subtler and subtler as you rise in consciousness. Okay? Just like, again to remind you, water, ice, water, water vapor. The same thing, the substance of the ice is very, very solid. That's our body. Then the water vapor, which is very, very like the emotions. Your emotions are fluid like water. And like water vapor, it is like the thoughts. It becomes subtler and subtler. Okay? So that's why he's using the word substantial. Don't neglect the word substantial. Immediately he's giving you more information. Okay? Substantial angry becoming of the mind, which is the object of our self-experience. Again, he's saying self-experience because within yourself. It's not something you're observing outside. You're not observing a car or two people fighting in the street, because then that's not self-experience, but that is world experience. That's a difference. Okay, so we are pointing this out because you can see how Srimad uses words. When he says self-experience, it is subjective. Okay? Are all rolled up into one wave of conscious force in movement. Because in the physical world, everything is in movement. So, but in the latter, which is the latter he explained, there is a certain rapid analysis of its constituents, and the act of self-experience partly detaches itself from the object. So what are the constituents? The four constituents that he has spoken about. Okay, the four things. The object which is observed, the observer, and the act of observing, and that which is observing. Okay. So this is the four elements. Rapid analysis of its constituents, that's possible. And the act of self-experience partly detaches itself from the object. If it detaches itself from the object, like here, I am seeing immediately that I am becoming angry. There is a difference between the observer and the observed, but same to say partly. When does it become fully? When you rise to the self. When you go outside your body, mind, life, it becomes full. The not partial detachment, but the word is partial, not partly. Partial detachment, when you are still in your body, mind, life. Okay, you can be observed, you can be objective to a certain extent. We are able not only to experience ourselves dynamically in the becoming, okay, in the process of movement of conscious force itself, but to stand back, perceive and observe ourselves. And if the detachment is sufficient to control our feeling and action, control to a certain extent our becoming. Even when you are identified with your body, mind, life, your mind can, to a certain extent, control the anger. You can suppress it. But when you are using your mind in level 1 of to control yourself, the control is imperfect, number 1, okay, and it is never complete. And it is also a suppression. That's the interesting part. It's a suppression. It's not a, same as using the word control. See, when you are controlling something, you're making an effort. No? So that is only partial. But even when you're identified with your body, mind, life, you can control yourself. Okay? To a certain extent. To a certain extent, very clear. But if you are outside your body, mind, life, and you have gone to level 2 of the spiritual planes of consciousness, this control can become actually much more effective. It can become much more. You can control, your control becomes much more effective. Okay? But when does it become 100%? Only when you go to the level 3. That's the Superman. Not the level 2 of the spiritual planes of consciousness, but level 3. Then you can really change your anger into something calm and cool and quiet. That's what he's saying. Okay? So, very interesting analysis. And just to, we'll do one thing. We'll summarize what he's saying, okay, so that it becomes clear to us. So, Chandra is saying in the para, let us analyze the act of observation. Okay, I'm reading out the summary of what I have written. It's not Srimada's text, but I have summarized. And in Srimada's language is very, very inclusive and very sophisticated. So sometimes it helps to make things in simpler language. Okay, so let us analyze the act of observation. That's what he's saying in the para. There are 4 elements in the mental being. In the mental being's observation. When you are doing that, there are 4. The object of mental consciousness, okay, that is what is being observed, okay, the observed. It can be anger, it can be grief, it can be greed, it can be anything. Second, the act of mental consciousness, the observation, okay. Then the occasion, the event in time and space, okay. Then the subject, and who is the subject? The observer, the mental being, the Manomaya Purusha, okay. That's a mental being. So note, the act of mental, the observation is different from the observer, okay. So these 4 things are there. That which is being observed, that the act of observing, the observer, and the occasion when it is happening. He is also including occasion because later on he will tell you very interesting things. Okay. When you remember, 2 days ago I got angry, if you remember, okay, that's why he uses the word occasion. When you remember, a little bit of anger is repeated in your being. That's what he will tell us later on. Very interesting. Okay. So these are the 4 things that he's saying. So now I continue the summary. When we observe our anger, grief, which are the objects, there are 2 possibilities. Number 1, we become anger itself, complete ignorant identification with the movement of nature. We become greed, we become grief, or we become anger. He is using negative terms, but it can also be joy, okay, and pleasure. That also is possible. The second possibility, we may detach ourselves partially from the movement of anger, grief, and evaluate it. Okay, we put either a good or a bad on it. Evaluation means whether it is good or bad and how it is evolving. It's possible to observe the anger without the evaluation. That's possible, but you can also evaluate it. Then, so there is either full involvement or a detachment from the emotional movement. This is what he's saying in simple words. Okay. Now we can go to the next para. We have got time. We have got 15 minutes. So we'll read the next one. However, there is usually a defect in this act of self-observation. So who will read? Jasmine, you will read?
Yes, Rangada, I can read. I'm
Okay.
reading.
Okay, go ahead.
However, there is usually a defect even in this act of self-observation, for there is indeed a partial detachment of the act from the object, but not of the mental person from the mental act. The mental person and the mental action are involved or rolled up in each other. Nor is the mental person sufficiently detached or separated either from the emotional becoming. I am aware of myself in an angry becoming of my conscious stuff of being and in a thought perception of this becoming. But all thought perception also is a becoming and not myself, and this I do not yet sufficiently realize. I am identified with my mental activities or involved in them, not free and separate. I do not yet directly become aware of myself uh, apart from my becomings and my perception of them, apart from the forms of active consciousness, which I assume in the waves of the sea of conscious force, which is the stuff of my mental and life nature. It is when I entirely detach the mental person from his act of self experience that I become fully aware first of the sheer ego and in the end of the witness self or the thinking mental person, the something or someone who becomes angry and observes it, but is not limited or determined in his being by the by the anger or the perception. He is, on the contrary, a constant factor aware of an unlimited succession of conscious movements and conscious experiences of movements and aware of his own being in that succession. But he can be aware of it also behind that succession, supporting it, containing it, always the same in fact of being and force of being beyond the changing forms or arrangements of his conscious force. He is thus the self that is immutably and at the same time the self that becomes eternally in the succession of time.
Ah, okay, so there is a shade of the Gita, the Sakshi, the Jnata, the Anumanta, the Bhokta, and the Bharta. So there's a touch of all that in this, what he's saying. So let us see, however, what he's saying. We'll try and finish it. We've got 10 minutes. However, there is usually a defect, even in this act of self-observation. When you are identified with your body-mind life in the normal consciousness of man, you can, to a certain extent, control your anger, what he's saying. Okay, but it is defective. It's not full. He has already told you it's partially taken control. So he is now using a different word, defect. Okay? Even in this act of self-observation. For everybody does not have the capacity of self-observation. They they completely identify themselves with the anger and justify it. But those who are very objective about themselves, evaluate it and say, no, there's something wrong. I should not have got angry. So that's what he's talking about now. For there is indeed a partial detachment of the act from the object. The object being the anger, and the act is the observation of the anger. The act is the observation of the anger, and the object is the anger itself. You are observing your anger, but not of the mental person from the mental act. Okay. Now he is making a distinction between the mental person, the thinker, and the thought. Okay. So first of all, there is the anger, which is the object. You can identify yourself with that. Or now he is saying, who is identifying? The observer. So there is a difference between the observer and the act of observing. Very interesting. Huh? That means you are able to see your thoughts. You are able to detach yourself from your thoughts. Okay, that's what he's saying. Partial detachment of the act from the object, but not of the mental person from the mental act. The mental person, the one who is thinking, and the mental action, the thought. Okay, there is a thinker and the thought. And the mental action are involved or rolled up in each other. Normally, we identify ourselves fully with the thought. We don't think that I am thinking. Okay. Partially is possible. You can think of what you thought in the past. You can observe what you thought in the past, but not immediately when it's occurring. That's very difficult. Okay. Not of the mental person from the mental act. The mental person and the mental action are involved or rolled up into each other. Nor is the mental person sufficiently detached or separated either from the emotional becoming. So all the three become one. The anger, the observation of the anger, and the observer. All the three become one. Okay. I am aware of myself in an angry becoming of my conscious stuff of being. Now note the word stuff. Stuff is a word that he uses also for substance. Okay. Your anger and your thoughts all have stuff, all have substance. This is something we don't think of it that way. But there is this stuff. Even the divine is substance. Okay, at the highest level. But this substance is absolutely subtlest possible. So there is a subtle matter, there is a gross matter, and there is a whole range of degrees between these two. Okay? So he uses the word stuff of being. He's giving you information. And in a thought perception of this becoming. But all thought perception also is a becoming. There's a movement. When he says becoming, there's a movement, not a static condition. And not myself. So the thought is different from the thinker. That's what he's pointing out. All thought perception also is a becoming and not myself. Because myself can become absolutely static. Okay? But it's not a becoming, it can be the being. That's what he's meaning. He makes a difference between being and becoming. Being is the thinker and becoming is the thought and not myself. And this I do not yet sufficiently realize. When we are identified with the body, mind, life, these four elements are not very clear to us. I am identified with my mental activities or involved in them. Okay. In other words, what are the two things? Why is he using the word or? That means I am completely identified with my anger, or I am partly conscious of what's happening. I am involved in them. 80% I have become anger. 20% I am observing myself becoming angry. That is the involvement. Not free and separate. Total free and separate only in the self possible. I do not yet directly become aware of myself apart from my becomings and my perception of them, apart from the forms of active consciousness which I assume. Now, very interesting phrase. In the waves of the sea of conscious force. The individual is a part of the universe. And the universe is vast and infinite. And the individual is a small formation of this universe. The universal matter becomes your body. The universal field of prana, universal, infinite prana, everywhere. That becomes your vital being, a small portion of that. Okay. And there is a mental world of thought. Okay. Conscious thought. That becomes your mind. So that's what he's saying in the sea. So I am a wave in that sea. My body is a wave of the sea of matter. I am a wave of the sea of universal prana, okay, energy. My vital is that. My mind is a small wave in the sea of mentality, universal mentality. That's what Swami is saying. When you use the words waves of the sea, you have to understand it that way. There is an intimate connection between the universe and the individual. The individual is the universe condensed into a small form. He is a universal, but he is only a small form, okay, of conscious force, which is the stuff of my mental and life nature. Okay, to understand this wave and the sea, I usually give another example also, which is very, very useful. You are a grain of salt, okay? And if you dissolve that grain of salt, the saltiness is everywhere. Okay? Now that's a universal, but that saltiness can be crystallized into a form, into a small particle of salt. So you are the crystallization of the universe. Okay, so it becomes very interesting and we can understand what is. Now, I go to the next sentence. It is when I entirely detach the mental person from his act of self-experience that I become fully aware first of the sheer ego. Now, when I entirely detach my mental person from the act of self-experience, in other words, you have gone to the self. When you go to the self, you realize that there is an ego below, which is a non-existent thing. Actually, it disappears. The ego is the shadow of the self in the physical world. And in the end of the witness itself, or the thinking mental person. When Shamla is using the word thinking mental person, he is talking of the Manomaya Purusha. Okay. One day we'll discuss more detail the Annamaya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Manomaya Purusha, Vijnanamaya Purusha, and Anandamaya Purusha. Your consciousness can take all these different stands. It can identify itself fully with the body, then it's an Annamaya Purusha. It can identify itself with the vital, it becomes the Pranamaya Purusha. It identifies with the mind, then it becomes the Manomaya Purusha. It can go into the spiritual planes of consciousness and become the Vijnanamaya Purusha, or you can go to the highest level and become the Anandamaya Purusha. The consciousness can go on changing and becoming subtler and subtler and more powerful. So it's now 8:34. We've got 1 minute. We'll try and finish this paragraph. He is, on the contrary, who is the he? The mental person, the Manomaya Purusha. He is, on the contrary, a constant factor aware of an unlimited succession of conscious movements. Where is this unlimited succession of conscious movements? In the physical world. The physical world is constantly in movement, and your body-mind life is part of that movement. And it's an unlimited, going on eternally, succession of conscious movements. One moment you are angry, next moment you are happy, next moment you are greedy, next moment you are happy. So this is what he's saying. And conscious experiences of movements and aware of his own being in that succession. You see, you observe your own body-mind life and its movements. But he can be aware of it also behind that succession. He can watch the body-mind life from outside. That's the experience of the self, nirvana, supporting it, containing it, always the same in fact of being. In other words, static. Always the same in fact of being, static. Note the word being, no movement, and becoming is the movement. And force of being beyond the changing forms or arrangements of his conscious force. So your conscious force can become static, then you are in the self, outside the body-mind life, or you are identified with your body-mind life and you are experiencing the changes. Okay? Then you are in an egoistic consciousness. He is thus the self that is immutably and at the same time the self that becomes eternally in the succession of time. You can become conscious of yourself outside the body-mind life, and you can see yourself separately from your body-mind life, or you can see yourself as both. That also is possible. Part of me is the self, and part of me is in the body-mind life. That's it. When you are only the self, you are the witness self, Sakshi. Again, we come back to the Gita's separation, Sakshi. Or you become the Anumanta. And then if you are conscious of the body-mind life also, then you become the Bharta. You are supporting your own body-mind life. Part of you is there. Okay. So this is what we're saying. And finally, At the highest level, you can become the Ishwar. Your control of your body, mind, life becomes absolutely complete. That's the Ishwar. Okay? So, we have come to the end of our 2 minutes beyond our time. Next, it is evident that there are not really two selves, the static and the fluid. That we'll see next week.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. So I hope that you followed what he's saying. We try to put it as simply as possible. But it's very interesting. We never think of ourselves as there are 4 elements in it. There is the object of observation, there is the observer, there is the being that is observing, and there is the occasion. Okay. So, yeah, okay. Au revoir, everybody. But au revoir, everybody.